Welcome to the Black Entrepreneur Experience podcast, inside the business, buzz, and brilliance of Black entrepreneurs. Here is your host, Dr. Frances Richards.
What happens in Vegas goes all over the world on Black Entrepreneur Experience, episode number 439. Thank you for joining us as we elevate the Black Entrepreneur Experience by interviewing CEOs, thought leaders, innovative thinkers, and Black entrepreneurs across the globe. I'm your host, Dr. Frances Richards. Would you like to have a conversation with a CEO and founder that has given 4 TedX talks, authored 33 books, published 8,000 videos, and has appeared in many national campaigns, including Nike, Finish Line, Wendy, Gatorade, and Buick, to name a few? I'm excited to welcome Dre Baldwin, CEO and founder of Work on Your Game, Inc. Welcome.
I'm excited to be here, Dr. Frances. Thank you for having me on. This is Dre, by the way.
Dre, thank you for that. Dre, thank you for the correction.
Sure.
I've given our audience such a brief bio. Why don't you fill in the gaps and share with our audience what you'd like them to know about you and your business?
Sure. So I'll give you the 2-minute version. So I come from the city of Philadelphia, PA, now based in Miami, Florida. Background, always played sports, got into basketball at a pretty late age 14, which is late if you're trying to play college or pro ball. And didn't play high school ball till my senior year. Only played 1 year. And that 1 year that I played, I didn't really play, sat the bench mostly. I went to a Division III college for sports. Well, I went to the college, but then I was going to play on the sports team. I had to walk on, which means nobody had invited me. I wasn't a known entity. Played at the D3 level, but didn't set the world on fire. And also D3 is the third tier of sports for people who don't really follow. Those are not the guys you see on TV. And usually they don't produce pro players from the D3 level. So once I got out of school, I wanted to play pro ball because I felt like I was getting better and I felt like I might be good enough to do so. But I didn't have anyone coming to me to come play in the pros the same way nobody was coming to me to play in college. A year removed from graduation, because my first year out from college, I worked a couple regular jobs. I worked at Foot Locker. I worked at Balwin Total Fitness selling gym memberships. I went to an exposure camp, which was like a job fair for ball players, played pretty well there. And through that, I was able to get my first playing opportunity, which was in Lithuania in 2005. Now, at the same time, I took the footage from that exposure camp and I put it on this brand new website called YouTube. And that's where I started to actually build an audience online, because basketball players who were a generation younger than me, they want to learn how to play. And unlike my generation, where we had to figure it out on our own, or you hopefully knew somebody, they could go to the internet and get information. So I saw that there was an underserved audience of people who wanted to learn basketball, and I knew enough that I could teach it to them. So I started putting videos very sporadically on YouTube from 2005 to about 2009. And I'm still playing overseas at this point. So I'm back and forth between Europe and the United States playing pro ball. But in 2009, my phone wasn't ringing. I was a free agent. I was in the United States and I wasn't getting a call for the next contract. And I was getting into my mid to late 20s. So I asked myself, what can I do here to where I can combine basketball, using the computer and the internet, because I've always been a computer internet guy, and making money? How can I do all three at the same time? Answer to that was I started building what we now call a personal brand, and I started creating more content and started really leveraging strategically and purposely social media. And these were new ideas in 2009. They seem kind of commonplace today to talk about it, but back then those were new ideas. I started creating my own products and services. I started selling products online, first just to my basketball audience. And also those basketball players started asking questions about my mindset, because they heard the stories of what I just told you. 1 year high school ball, walked on and playing college. I had to sell my way into getting into the pros, which is different than how most athletes' careers go. So a lot of the athletes, Francis, started asking me questions about my mentality. What keeps you coming to the gym every day to work out, even though you're not sure when the next call is coming? Or how do you get the confidence to perform in a game like you do in practice? Or you barely played in high school, you walked on in college. How do you get the mindset to keep trying when all of these things are not really working in your favor? Or how do you get started doing any of this stuff? Because by this point, getting known on the internet was now becoming a career aspiration, right? Well, before this, the internet was just the internet. But now kids are growing up, instead of wanting to be a firefighter or president, now they want to be a YouTuber. So I was kind of known on the internet. So now they say, well, how can I do it? How can I get known on the internet? So I started talking about discipline, confidence, mental toughness, personal initiative, mindset pieces. And those became the foundation of what I do now, because not only did the athletes appreciate it, but also people who were not athletes, this is how they started finding me. So my transition from just talking to ball players to talking to other types of people like entrepreneurs, that started around 2010. So that told me when I get done playing ball, now I can just talk to this audience of people and I can take this mindset piece. It can serve the athletes. It can also serve these non-athlete individuals. And that can be my transition out of sports, because I knew you can't play basketball forever, right? And I knew once I wasn't on that court, dunking every day, I wouldn't be known so much to the basketball audience. It'd be a new wave of guys who would come in and they'd be the guys in basketball. So that's what I knew I was going to do. So in 2015, when I stopped playing, that's what I did. So I've been doing this full time, basically taking the work on your game philosophy based around mindset, strategy, systems, and accountability since 2015, and building the work on your game business. The philosophy and the business are the same thing, building that ever since then. So that's how we got here today.
Talk about your first TEDx talk.
Yeah.
And preparing for that.
Sure. So my first TEDx talk was in 2015, and the subject was the third day, which I now have a book about it. I didn't have that book at the time that I did that talk. And preparation for that one, if I can remember. So that talk happened around this time of year. I don't know when this episode is coming out, but it happened around November of 2015. And I had gotten booked to give the TED talk probably in the summer, maybe July or August. There was a preparation period there where I met with, and I just talked to them on Zoom because it was in South Florida here where the talk was given. But I talked to the curators a couple of times via Zoom, and they just were asking about, what do you have? Can we see an outline of what you're going to talk about? And refined it a little bit. It wasn't a ton of refining that went on. They were kind of hands off with it, but I just wanted to make sure I was fully prepared, because I know with a TED talk, you get, there's a very short talk. It's not an hour-long speech. It's about 15 minutes, if that. And you just want to nail it that one time that you get it. So I made sure that I was fully prepared. And what that talk was about, the third day, was a concept that I actually got from basketball, which was the players were asking me, well, Dre, you always seem to be in an empty gym by yourself. Do you own the gym? Do you have a gym in your house? Do you rent the gym out so nobody else could use it? But none of those was the case. The whole concept of the third day was about when someone first starts doing something, or everybody starts doing something, everyone shows up every day because everybody's all excited and trying to show themselves. And then by that second day, you got a little bit fewer people not showing up as early as before. And then by that third day, and again, this is a metaphor, it doesn't have to be 3 days in a row. By the third day, you only had the diehards. You had the people who are really serious. They're the only ones who are still showing up. So I explained that to the ball players probably about a year before that, and explained that this is what the third day is about. That if you can just continually show up more often than everyone else, even when you don't feel like showing up, that is a competitive advantage in itself. I had that concept again from basketball, but I gave the speech and I made it more of a universal message that anyone could apply. Because again, not everyone who was listening to me or everyone watching that TED Talk was a basketball player. So that's where the concept came from. And the preparation for it, again, I had already come up with that concept years before. So by the time I was given the TED Talk, all I wanted to do was just condense it down to a really solid, whatever length of time that speech was. Let's use maybe about 14 minutes, about a 14-minute speech that could really hit home and drive the message in the way that I wanted to, which I think I did.
Talk about authoring the books. Out of all the books you've written, which book are you, and that's going to be kind of hard, but which book are you the most excited about and why?
Good question. Of all the books that I've written, which one am I most excited about? I could probably think of a few of them that would fit that, but I'll answer by saying probably my book, Work on Your Game. And the reason why I say that book, Work on Your Game, is because that's where I took the whole Work on Your Game philosophy and put it all in one book. So all the other books that I've written, there are pieces of those books in the Work on Your Game book. So the Work on Your Game book is kind of like the one at the top of the family tree, let's say, of the whole Work on Your Game. It encompasses everything. And then every other book is kind of like one of the kids or grandkids of the Work on Your Game philosophy, I guess, the best metaphor that I can give. And I like that book because I probably worked on that one the longest. It had the heaviest and the most arduous editing process when I did that book, Work on Your Game. And I knew it was the book that I wanted to write. I've been thinking about writing that book, Work on Your Game, for years, because I knew I wanted to write one book that took everything that I was about and basically took bits and pieces of everything that I had been through, the reason why that philosophy existed, and put it all in one book. So that Work on Your Game book is the book where I did that. If I had to have somebody read just one book of mine, it would be that one, because it basically explains everything and why I am what I am, why this business is what it is.
And if someone is interested in getting your books, where can they pick up your books from?
No, the best way to get any of them is to go to workonyourgame.com/books with an S on the end. Workonyourgame.com/books. Everything's listed there.
I want you to have a monologue. I want you to name this person, living or not, and they've inspired you so much. Who is that person and why? And what are you saying to that person?
Person living or not who has inspired me so much? Well, there's a lot of people. I would probably default to probably someone in the music industry. Even though I'm not a musician, never made any music, I've grown up with the music. I've grown up with hip hop and rap music. So I had to pick one person. Let's say I'll go with 50 Cent, the rapper. He's still my favorite rapper to this day, even though he doesn't even make music. I think he's more into TV and movies. But what I always identified with 50 Cent was that his story was like the ultimate comeback story. So what I always admired about him is that he came back. And he came back from, most people know his story, that he was about to come out in music. He got shot, almost died, survived the shooting, came back, and he built his career on the heels of kind of playing up that story. Like, they tried to kill me, but they were unsuccessful. And now I'm more successful, so, and just the ambition behind his message. So he would be the person that if I had to pick one person, I would go with him. Again, even though my life upbringing was nothing like his, and my career is nothing like his either. Because again, he was making music, I was playing sports. So we didn't even do the same thing. But I always identified with the energy and the message underneath what 50 Cent went through, and then what he subsequently did as a response to what he went through. So I could kind of draw a parallel from him getting shot and coming back. And I could look at myself, well, look, if he could get shot and come back, what do I have to complain about? I'm not on the basketball team. That's nothing compared to that, right? So if he could come back from that, I can come back from this. So I always drew inspiration from that.
Dre, advice you wish you had followed.
Advice that I wish I had followed. That's a good question. I would say that as an athlete, I think I could have had a better career, especially in my amateur days, like up through college. I could have had a better career had I started earlier, but nobody told me to start. But I think I could have had better practice habits as far as team practice. I was always good at practicing by myself. That's how I was able to develop the skill that led me to the pros. But I didn't always have the best work ethic when it came to practicing within the team concept, like coming to practice every day with the team and playing hard every day in practice. So my coaches would get annoyed with me because they knew I had the skill to be a great player, but I didn't always have the work ethic in practice. So I think if I had practiced better, I probably would have had maybe would have made the high school team maybe sooner. And I definitely could have had a better college playing career had I had that work ethic sooner. I didn't really develop it till I got to the pros.
There are so many brands and businesses that are dominating. Talk about a brand or a business that's dominating that you admire and why.
That's easy. That'd be Apple. I would go to Apple with that one and I talk about them often. And then everybody knows Apple, right? We all had the phones. We all many of us got the computers, the watches, the tablets, and that's pretty much their whole business. And I talk about this to my audience all the time because I often talk about the 80-20 principle, which is 80% of our results come from 20% of our inputs. And a lot of people don't know the story with Apple. And if they don't, they should read Walter Isaacson's book, which is titled Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs, the guy who started Apple with a business partner. Now, Steve started the company. They were doing their thing in the 80s and going into the 90s. And then Steve got kicked out of his own company, which has to be devastating. Like, you start a company, you get kicked out of your own company. So he goes and does other things. He starts a company called Pixar, as many people know. They didn't make movies. Then Apple was failing. Apple was about to go out of business. And they had tried a bunch of different leaders, CEOs, and none of them were successful. They're almost about to be insolvent. They last ditch effort, their last choice, they had, let's see if we can bring Steve back. So they bring Steve Jobs back. And the first thing that Steve Jobs does when he comes back, and one of the most important of the first things that he did, was that he looked at Apple's product line. And at the time, Apple had a whole bunch of different products. So if anyone remembers, because these days when we get a lot of electronics, we do it online. But back in the day, you would actually go to the store, right? So you go to the electronics store and there's so many different computers. It's like 30 different computers and they all seem very similar. You can't tell what's the difference between number 2 and number 12. And Apple was like that. They had so many different products under each heading. So when it came to laptops, they had a bunch of desktops. And Steve said it's confusing to the customer which one they should buy. So the most important thing Steve Jobs did was that he cut Apple's product line down to a very small amount. At the time, this was early 2000s. So he cut it down to one laptop computer, one desktop computer. So the laptop we call the MacBook. Now everyone knows about that. Then one desktop, which was I think it was called the iMac, or just the Mac, period. And this is before we had the phones. This is before we had the iPod. This is before the tablet. So it was just those two products. It's pretty much what he cut everything down to. And he just streamlined them. He said, let's just make this the best one laptop, the best one desktop. And then soon came the iPod. The iPod was replaced by the iPhone. He basically cannibalized his own product with the iPhone. Then we got the tablet. Then we got the watch. And these days, Apple's product line is literally 4 products. They have a computer. If you want to say laptop, desktop, you can call that 2 in 1. They have a phone. They have a tablet. And they have a watch. Next time you go in the Apple store, look at the table. You only see 4 products: a computer, a tablet, a phone, and a watch. And they're a $1 billion company with 4 products. And I always bring that up. And when I talk to entrepreneurs, especially those of us who are we come from the creator era where we could pretty much create anything as much as we want. Like, I got 33 books. People have all these courses. We got all these coaching programs and different masterminds. And some people have 100 different products that they're trying to sell. And I tell them, well, Apple has $1 billion in cash and they have 4 products because they specialize. They streamline everything that they did and just focus on the main things that were producing most of the outcomes, and just said, let's just get really, really good at these main things and just send everybody to that. And the next time any of you goes into the mall or you go into an Apple store, notice that you never see an Apple store empty. Notice there's always a whole bunch of people in the Apple store, and they only got 4 products. So you know exactly what's in there. Why you go in there every time? You can't not go in there, right? Yeah, I'm not even about to buy anything, but I go in, every time I see Apple store, I go in, right? And that's genius. That's the genius of Apple, is that with 4 products, they have people always coming in, always looking at the stuff, and they keep buying it. So I would say Apple is the answer to that question.
I want you to have a monologue, and I want you to talk to this person, living or not, and they have impacted your life so much. Who is that person, and what are you saying to that person?
Okay, so another person, let's see. Second person I picked, let's go sports. So I'll go Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan has to be that second person. So even though Michael was a little bit taller than me, so I didn't try to play like him, but the mentality that Michael Jordan had, I've always, who doesn't admire that, especially athletes? And one thing with Michael Jordan is that his abilities and his success and the impact he had it translated across different genres. So you have people who never even played sports who were impacted by Michael Jordan, and people who don't even play basketball. So you got football players, soccer players, hockey players who are impacted by what Michael Jordan represented. And the thing about Michael Jordan is that he just had a very strong will. He was extremely mentally tough. And it wasn't just about his skill and his ability, because there are a lot of athletes who have skill and ability, but they don't have anywhere the impact that Michael Jordan had. And I've read damn near every book written by him and every book written about Michael Jordan. And one thing that was big with him is that he was singularly focused on being the best that he could possibly be at his one job, which was dominating on the basketball court. He was not trying to, these days you see athletes, they're trying to be a brand. They're trying to do sponsorship deals. Athletes have podcasts. They got more podcast episodes than they have points in the game, right? They got podcasts explaining why they had a bad game yesterday. Athletes are trying to do everything. They have clothing lines. They're making albums, and they're not even doing as much as they could be doing in the game on the court for their team. But they're doing everything other than playing basketball. Whereas Michael Jordan's only focus was, I'm just going to be the most dominant basketball player in the world. And I tell this to entrepreneurs the same way, that if you were just to focus on just the one thing that you could be great at, and there's a whole book called The One Thing, right? If you just focus on that one thing you could be great at and be as great as you could at that, squeeze all the juice out of that orange, metaphorically speaking, you can get all the stuff that you think you need, that you can get all the stuff that you would get that you think you need to do 20 things to get. So a lot of athletes are doing 20 different things aside from playing sports because they feel like, well, I got to go grab all these opportunities while they're out there. But if you would just dominate in the one thing that you have, all those opportunities will find you anyway. And you wouldn't even have to do all that extra stuff. The challenge with that is very uncomfortable for people to go all in with both feet on one thing. Because what if you fail, right? What if you come up short? What if Michael Jordan had failed at going all in on that one thing? Then he wouldn't be Michael Jordan. But nobody else has even tried it. Right? So you look around these days at the best athletes, you notice they're doing everything, right? So you take someone like LeBron, who's out there today. LeBron's doing like 30 different things besides basketball. He's pretty good at basketball, but he's doing a whole bunch of other things besides basketball. Michael Jordan did one thing. And that's why to this day, he's the greatest athlete, at least from what I've seen. I was born in the 80s, so I don't know athletes before me, but he is the greatest in every sport from what I've seen in the last 40 plus years. And the main reason is he was focused on one specific thing, similar to Steve Jobs. And that's not a coincidence.
What problem exists in the world today that you would like to solve?
That's a really good question. One of them that I would say is that a lot of human beings they operate off of what I call inaccurate formulas. An inaccurate formula is an idea that people will have in their mind, or a belief system that people have in their mind, that if I do A, B, C, then I'll get this outcome. But the formula is inaccurate. So even if you do A, B, C, you don't actually get the outcome that you thought you were going to get. And the problem is people get so emotionally and habitually connected to these inaccurate formulas that even when the formula is not working, they keep doing it. And that's because of our habits. And human beings are creatures of habit. So once we get into a habit of doing something, even when that habit is not working, that habit is very hard to break. And this is one of the reasons why many people have big goals and big dreams in life, but they never actually achieve them. Not because they don't have the skill, not because they don't have the opportunity, and it's not because they don't have the resources. It's simply because they can't untether their mind from the idea of I have to do it this way. And this is the reason why coaching and consulting industries exist, because we can help people break out of that inertia of this way that you've been thinking and actually try something different. The challenge with it is that the only way you can coach somebody is if they want to be coached, right? So if they don't want to be helped, you can't help them, right? So you're going to help people who show up and ask to be helped. So if there's a way the best way to solve that problem is really, you can only help the people who want it. You can't make somebody think something that they don't want to think. You can't make someone do something that they don't want to do. So the biggest problem that I would want to solve is to help people, again, break their habits, break their inaccurate formulas of the way that they've been thinking, and say, hey, how about we try something different? And they have to be open-minded enough to be willing to do it. Because again, you can't force this upon anybody. And if you try to force it upon them, you'll be frustrated and they'll hate you. So you can't make them do it. You can only just share the knowledge and hope they listen.
Dre, you've been an early adopter to internet marketing. What do you attribute your success to?
Great question. So when it comes to internet marketing, I wish I could say I was just a genius who just thought it up out of nowhere, but that's not true. So a couple things. Number one, I had to give credit to my parents. My mother is an educator. She had my sister and I reading from a very early age. So I was always in the books. So the reading and the writing was seeded from my upbringing and the fact that my mom had us in books very early. My sister to this day is a college professor. Secondly, that's number one. Number two was I got introduced to business when I was in college, as a matter of fact, which is actually kind of late. Someone put a bulletin board posting up that said, if you want to make some extra money, I responded to the bulletin board posting. It happened to be this guy was a network marketer. And even though I did not go into network marketing as a career, I went to a couple of the hotel meetings. And in those meetings, there were two things that happened. Number one, actually three things. Number one, the guy on the stage speaking, he took a lot of things that I thought were true about business and money, that like the traditional way of doing business and making money, and he broke those false beliefs. He helped me understand that there's a different way to make money that a lot of other people follow, but you're not going to learn doing the mainstream thing. So I have a 4-year degree from Penn State University in business. And the things that this guy was talking about at that hotel meeting, I never heard them in 4 years in those college lecture halls. So that's number one. So my introduction to network marketing opened my mind to a different way of doing business. Number two, in that same meeting, the guy said, make sure you go buy the personal development books when you leave the room, because there was these ladies sitting outside the room with all these books. And he was name dropping authors like Zig Ziglar and Tony Robbins and Jim Rohn and Brian Tracy. And I never heard of those guys. And I didn't even buy the books because I was a broke college kid at the time, so I couldn't afford them. But I went to eBay when I got back to school and I bought like pirated copies of the books. I bought Think and Grow Rich. I bought Robert Kiyosaki, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And those books, respectively, Think and Grow Rich taught me that there's a way to consciously alter the thought patterns in your mind that will alter your actions, that will alter your outcomes. And I didn't understand that was a real thing, but as soon as I read it, I knew it was for me. I knew that was right up my alley, right up my lane, personal development, which is what I still do to this day. And then in Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Robert Kiyosaki went into more detail that seed that had been planted in my mind at the hotel meeting. He went into more detail explaining there's a whole different way that another sector of the world does business and makes money. When he juxtaposed his poor dad who went to school and did all the right, quote unquote, right things, but didn't have any money, and his rich dad who dropped out of school, did all the quote unquote risky things, but he had all the money. So I said, there's a different way of doing things, but you got to adopt your mindset. It goes right back to what Think and Grow Rich was about. You got to change your mindset in order to take these actions. So I had to give credit to that as a second thing. So, and then the next thing was around 2009 when my phone wasn't ringing. I just read Tim Ferriss' 4-Hour Work Week. And in that book, that's where he talked about how to apply these same principles that I got from Kiyosaki, but he talked about how to apply them digitally, how to do it through the internet. And at the time, that's where I was. I was on the internet and on the computers. And Tim talked about, hey, here's how you test out a product idea. Here's how you can build an audience. Here's how you can sell a product. So I followed his blueprint to a T. And that's how I started selling things online. So when I made my first sale online, for instance, I remember I said to myself, I'll do this for the rest of my life, because I knew I couldn't play basketball forever. I knew at some point your shelf life as an athlete is relatively short. Most athletes are retired, quote unquote, by age 30. So I knew I couldn't play ball forever. I said, what am I going to do after basketball is over? Whenever it's over, what else can I do? So that's when I realized I can take an idea out of my head, turn it into a product or service, put a price tag on it, and exchange that for money, also known as intellectual property. I didn't know that phrase at the time, but when I did that, I said, I could do this for the rest of my life. And that's exactly what I've been doing since then.
What's your ideal client?
Great question. So ideal client is a person who appreciates psychographically. They appreciate the direct, straight to the point, no fluff, no BS approach, because that's my style of communication. And when I ask my ideal clients who I have now, I ask them, what is it about my approach or whatever I'm delivering that you appreciate most? None of them say, well, you got this great process or system, or that you're the smartest person, or you got the most information. That's not really the thing that brings people in, because informations and processes and systems can be copied, hacked. Somebody else can say the same thing that you said. That's not really the thing that brings people in. What really brings people in is that what they call psychographic alignment, meaning my way of thinking and your way of thinking, we're on the same page. That's what connects people. And again, if you think about a company like Apple, like we talked about earlier, it's that you connect with what they're about, their ethos. It's not necessarily that the iPhone is the best phone, right? Because how can most people can't even really tell the difference. What connects you to Apple is that you are about the same thing that they're about. And what they put out there, you think the same way. That's what makes people buy in. So my ideal client is that person who is entrepreneurial minded. If we went demographically, entrepreneurial minded, this person is usually over the age of 30. They either run a business or they have the mindset to run a business. They are looking for someone who can help them holistically, not just in their business, but also with their personal matters. There's a lot of clients who I work with, they don't even coming to me because they want to make more money. They're already making money. They want help with all the other things that they have sacrificed in the process of making money. And then they align with me, again, psychographically, as far as my approach.
What is the biggest takeaway that you want our audience to leave with from this conversation?
That everyone has a game, no matter what it is you do, whether you're a librarian, a maintenance worker, an entrepreneur, an athlete, an author, that we all are in a game. There's an author game, there's a maintenance man game, there's a librarian game. You know what the game is, understand what business you're actually in as opposed to the business you thought you were in. And then you work on your game so you can develop or create an opportunity for yourself. Once you have that opportunity, you have to go out there and perform. Once you perform, you produce results. And if you produce results, you get whatever rewards you want, whether that's fame, happiness, likes, followers, money, whatever it is that you want. You can name the reward that you want when people know that you'll produce a result. And then you just keep following that process over and over again and get all the results you want for your life.
What is your zone of genius?
Great question. My zone of genius is taking a concept that most people will look at as complex breaking it down into bite-sized pieces and then putting it back together in a way that anyone can understand and appreciate.
You've talked about several books. What book would you recommend to our audience and why?
I had to tell you my favorite book, 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene. So I found that when I used to browse bookstores back before you bought books on Amazon, you had to go to the actual store. So 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene, my favorite book of all time.
And why is that your favorite book?
Because when I came across the book, I remember when I was in the bookstores in Philly, where I'm from, and I looked at the back cover and it listed each one of the 48 chapters, which is the 48 laws. And I said, this book was written for me, because I knew these things. I always knew I had a different way of looking at the world than most people did. And I appreciate the fact that Robert Greene took the parts of life that some people might consider immoral or dirty or not so, quote unquote, correct. And he laid them out flat and said, just because you may not agree with these things doesn't mean that they don't exist. So even if you're not going to use them as an offensive weapon, you better be able to defend yourself against them, because somebody else will use them against you. That's what I always liked about that book, is that he was just raw and real and honest about how life is. Like, this is life as it is. So again, even if you don't want to be this type of person, you need to understand this type of person. So when you come across them, they can't use you in a way that you don't want to be used. And that realness, that is, again, the same thing that my ideal clients like about me. That's what I liked about that book.
Who are your top two influencers, mentors, and what lessons did they teach you?
My top two influencers or mentors, man, I listen to a good number of people, but if I had to mention two, I'll just think of two who I'm plugging into considerably right now. I would say Dan Kennedy, who is a old marketing guy. He was marketing back, before we had the internet, and he has a ton of material. So I've been going through a lot of his old stuff, because he's basically retired these days. He's semi-retired. So I've been going through a lot of his old stuff. So Dan Kennedy is one that I would say. And another that I would give credit to, who is, let's say, more contemporary. I'll go with a book that I'm reading right now, which is Ben Hardy and Dan Sullivan. They wrote a book called 10X is Easier Than 2X. And I've read the book 3 times already in the last month. So I'm probably about to read it again. So I would go with them since they're fresh on my mind.
What is the best decision you have made as a leader?
Best decision I have made as a leader is probably the best decision I made was just getting on the internet and then investing in what can this become? Because I remember in that 2009 time period when I didn't have a contract to play ball and I was trying to figure out what I could do, was looking at what was going on online. Because this is, again, this is right at the beginning of you can make ad revenue from YouTube videos, but there wasn't a clear, easy way to create products and services and sell them online. That did not exist. That wasn't a normal thing at that time. But I knew I had something. I had an audience, and I could see that it was growing, and I could see that the internet was getting easier and easier to use. And I knew at that time that what I was doing online was going to be bigger than what I did on the basketball court. So the best decision that I made was to lead myself into invest more heavily into what you're doing here in this online thing, whatever you want to call this, that we now call personal brand and social media. Invest more into this, because this is growing and is going to get bigger. So that was the best decision I ever made, because it led us to where we are today.
Let's talk legacy. When it's all said and done, how do you want to be remembered?
I want to be remembered as somebody who gave people the game as it is, not as they wanted it to be. And once they understood that I was giving them the game as it is, whether they took it from me or they had to go learn it themselves, they realized that, okay, what this person was saying was 100% true. And I'm glad that I came across them, because they gave me the game that I needed to take myself where I needed to go. So that's what I want to be remembered as.
Let's take a snapshot of the last 30 days.
Okay.
What is your greatest win?
My greatest win in the last 30 days is I've been making a list of things I need to get rid of. So going back to that book that I just mentioned, 10X is easier than 2X, a lot of it is about figuring out what is that 20 out of your 80-20 principle. What are the things that really are driving the most of what you want? And then what are the things that are not? And what are you willing to get rid of? Because that's the hardest part of leveling up for people, is not the additional effort or the additional work. It's what are you willing to drop and stop doing and get rid of, which is hard for people because our habits are connected to those things. And a lot of it are things that we're very comfortable with and even very good at. So you got to be willing to drop those. So that's been the biggest win for me, is just even thinking about it is a big win, because you got to really start getting mentally uncomfortable, then you get physically uncomfortable with it.
How do you celebrate your wins?
Good question. I don't really celebrate them. I can appreciate myself. Like, this is great that I did this, but I'm always looking for what's the next thing I can do? How can I move myself forward to the next goal and the next level? So I'm trying to think of, do I do any real celebrating? Not really. I don't really do celebrating on my wins. I can appreciate myself. I can think about it. I can feel good. I can take a deep breath and kind of bask in the energy, but it doesn't last that long.
Speaking about your next, what is on the horizon for you?
So on the horizon for me is we want to expand the work on your game message. I would bet most people in your audience never heard of me or work on your game before this interview. So I want to expand the message to where more people know my name, and work on your game becomes ubiquitous in the personal and professional development space, similar to how Nike has Just Do It. We want work on your game to be that, kind of like Xerox when it comes to personal and professional development.
Thank you for that. If there's one thing you could have changed and done differently in life, what is that one thing and why?
Would have got involved in personal and professional development, both of them. I would have got involved in them early. Now, I didn't have control over coming across personal development because I didn't know it was a thing. But if I found out about it when I was 15 instead of 21, I would probably have gotten further ahead sooner. So that one, and then professional development would be like going to conferences, investing in coaching, joining masterminds. I would have did that sooner, maybe even while I was still playing ball. So I could have got a head start on building up what became my business. I would have been further ahead of the curve. And if I had done that earlier, I might have been able to hit a jackpot really early in the internet game before everybody else jumped in it. So I would have caught that early wave.
So out of all the successes you've had, talk about that aha moment when you knew you were going to be successful.
No, that was the day I made my first sale. So when I made my first sale, and my first products that I sold were $4.99. I was just selling to basketball players who were following me on YouTube. And these are 13 to 24-year-olds. So that the aha moment was when I made the sale and I said, okay, this is a thing that I know I can do. Take an idea, turn it into a thing, put a price tag on it, and exchange it for money. So I can do that over and over again. And I got plenty of ideas. So those were just basketball ideas, but I had many more ideas that were coming on the horizon. So the moment that I knew things were going to work and I knew I was going to be successful was when I was able to translate the idea into money, and I had complete control over it, as opposed to when you're on social media, it's great to get the attention and have fans and likes and whatever vanity metrics, but you don't control that. Right? You could get your account can get hacked, you can get kicked off, anything can happen. But when I made that sale, I said I have 100% control over this, and this is actually putting money in the bank. So that's really was the area that I was most focused.
What is your most costly lesson that you have learned?
I didn't build an email list fast enough. So I didn't start building my email list till maybe 2013, but I was putting content out since 2005. I was even selling stuff. I wasn't building an email list. So luckily, I collected all those emails because you had to put your email in to buy. So I was able to salvage those, but I probably could have a list 10 times bigger than it is now had I started building it sooner.
And what is something that you've learned in internet marketing that we as consumers or even business owners should know that we don't know?
Right now, today is artificial intelligence. That's the next wave. It's not a fad. It's a trend, and it's going to be a thing. It's going to be in all of our lives. It's actually in our lives right now. Many people don't even know that it's in our lives. Even we're on Zoom right now. There's things AI can do in Zoom that a lot of people don't even know. So AI is the next thing that is coming. There's AI that can take photos for you. It can design websites. It can make graphics. It can design book covers. There's going to be AI that can be your personal assistant. Like, all of these things are coming in AI, and this is all going to happen within the next 3 to 5 years. So the big opportunity for all of us, especially entrepreneurs, is that the first thing is you just need to accept that it's coming. Secondly, you need to learn how to start using it. Learn how to start using AI, all different types of AI softwares and things it can do, whether it's summaries, writing articles, editing video, is going to be able to do all these things. A lot of things that we normally hire human beings to do, AI is going to replace those people. And if anyone who works in those spaces, what you need to do is not no fear for your life and your career, but you need to learn how to harness and use AI so that it doesn't replace you and completely render you irrelevant. And this applies to entrepreneurs as well, because many things that we do, AI is going to be doing it too. So you need to learn how to harness and use it so that you can utilize it and use it as a tool instead of it using you. So AI is the number one thing most entrepreneurs are not paying enough attention to that they need to be.
How do you make impact daily in people's lives?
Well, by putting out a message every day. So I put out content all the time. So having a conversation like this one, where people are going to hear this for, this will be out forever. People will be able to come across this. So utilizing social media, which is good to use because there are a lot of people there, sending emails out to my email list, putting content out there, putting a video up, whatever it happens to be, just putting a message out there that could possibly reach someone who needs to hear that message. And the good thing about content creation is that it stays. Once it's out, it's out. So it doesn't have to pop off that day. You never know. 3 years later, it might pop off. I've had content that came out and it kind of came and went, but then 3 years later, all of a sudden, everyone's watching that one video from 3 years ago and you don't even know why. So just putting something out there and making yourself findable is the key.
Dre, if you conducted this interview, what is the one question you would have asked yourself? I want you to ask the question and answer it.
Let's say, what's something that you could take from a sports experience that could apply to the business experience? And the answer to that is that it is still a performance and results-based business, which is something that I've been telling athletes for almost 2 decades, that it's not about how hard you work or think you worked, or how much you feel like you deserve an opportunity, or how bad you want the opportunity. Those things all are good to have, but the bottom line of what matters is, did you perform and what results were produced? That's how you get measured. And that's how we get measured in the adult world. That's how we get measured in the professional world. That's how you get measured in the sports world. That's the bottom line of everything. So all those other things are simply means to an end. The end is what got produced. What was the result?
We've come to the part of our interview. It's called Rapid Round of Fun. I'm going to ask you a series of questions, and I'm going to have you give very quick answers. If there's something you desire not to answer, feel free to say pass. Are you ready for the Rapid Round of Fun?
Yeah, it's my favorite part.
Your first job?
Pizza Hut.
The last movie you saw?
Man, I don't watch movies. So The Last Dance, the Michael Jordan documentary, if you want to count that.
You relax doing what?
Spending time with my son.
Your favorite color?
Black.
Your favorite comfort food?
Water ice. A lot of people don't know what that is.
Tell us what that is.
You know what it is?
No.
No, where are you from?
I'm from Wisconsin.
Okay. All right. So water ice is a up northeast part of America thing. So New York, Baltimore, Philly. Water ice is like Italian ice. Maybe people know it as Italian ice. So
Italian ice. I know.
It's crushed
Italian
ice that's flavored. But there's certain companies that make it better than others. So I used to work at a company called Rita's Water Ice, and their water ice is amazing. So that's my favorite comfort food.
Thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
Your favorite singer or rapper?
No, 50 Cent.
Your favorite dance song?
Dance song. I don't know. That's a good question. Favorite dance song. Thinking one I was listening to lately was Step in the Name of Love, R. Kelly.
What food you eat every week, no matter what?
I eat bananas every day.
Workout or hit the couch?
Workout. No couch.
Dre Baldwin, thank you so much for joining us on Black Entrepreneur Experience Podcast. Before we let you go, share with our audience the best way for them to connect with you and to do business with you. And feel free to leave all your social media handles.
Sure. The best way to connect with me is follow me on any of your favorite social media platforms. I'm probably most active on Instagram, which is just my name at Dre Baldwin, because I use Instagram stories a lot. I do have a daily motivation text message that I send out to everyone in my text community. It's free to join the community. I also send out a weekly message as well called the Monday Motivation. That number is 305-384-6894. And we're having some technical difficulties as of the day of this recording, but by the time this comes out, maybe we'll have it fixed. But if you just text me, that number will eventually be working. As far as working with me directly, best way to do that is in Work On Your Game University. That's the only place I do any coaching or consulting. And that website is workonyourgameuniversity.com. And between all that, we have a bunch of books, we got courses, we have all those things. So once you come into any one of those areas, then you'll get to know about everything else. So follow me on social, send me a text, or go to workonyourgameuniversity.com.
Thank you, Dre. That's a wrap.
Thank you for listening and subscribing to Black Entrepreneur Experience. We would love for you to leave a review and rating on iTunes and share with your friends. For show notes and more episodes, go to www.beepodcast.com. Join us next Wednesday, and remember, green is the new black. So keep your bank accounts and your business in the black.